Hello, Ancients. I'm Robert Sheehan, and I play Tom Nэтsuorti. Mortal Engines is an imaginative world filled with larger-than-life characters, none quite so big as London. When producer and co-writer Peter Jackson first read these books, he knew this Traction City would blow audiences away and show them something they'd never seen. London has scale, it has history, and it rolls across the great hunting ground like a mountain on the move. But how did this behemoth come to life? Well, I'm happy to be your guide on this epic journey into the beating heart of Mortal Engine's greatest Traction City. Welcome to London.
When I first read Mortal Engines, I really didn't know how you were going to create that on screen. It's really tricky because it's like, well, I don't think anyone's seen moving cities before.
We're in the city, 6 miles in closing.
Get down now!
We had to make some strong choices about designing London, and at some point we sort of had to just jump into the boldness.
It was difficult to find a design for London that felt right. We did a big design period back in 2007, 2008, and then we did another big design period in this last few years. There's probably a good 200 drawings of what London might look like. All of them are based on Philip's book.
It was just an exploratory process. This is a future where we've had to reinterpret it looking back, but it can't feel like we've just bodged together bits and pieces. We had these great artists designing things. You're getting bombarded with all these different ideas from me and Peter and Fran and the production designer.
We kept searching and searching for what felt right. The shape, the silhouette, the detail.
We've been driven by the source material in the book and thinking of things in a practical sense rather than letting them be driven by an aesthetic quality.
The tough thing about designing anything that's this futuristic is what icons do you honor? We kept pushing to create something that was sort of fantastically beautiful but felt historical and grounded in reality.
Christian thought this idea of London as a giant lion modelled on the Trafalgar lions. It's evolved to actually breaking those lions down and having them as sentinels either side. The design philosophy with this is that the city will really have a look and feel of a living being.
We have an intimate connection with vehicles on the ground, how they move, and we have an intimate connection with cities, and making a city on wheels moving poses lots of creative challenges.
Pete hired Marco Spatoni, and Marco came out to New Zealand and brought a team of guys with him, and they started working on previs for the film.
I've been working on previs starting from 2008. We needed to do quite a bit of testing to understand how we would have visualized this.
When we picked up Mortal Engines to get it back on track again, we were able to look at the previs and you could see what was really working fantastically well and some of the physicality of the cities and the size.
London is a fine balance between raw movement and fine movements of building down to the little rattling of small features.
It was a big technological feat in animation. This is something that we couldn't even imagine doing a couple of decades ago. We got something going about 300 to 400 kilometers an hour. London can reach that speed as well.
I think as designers, you are always trying to strip it back down to the reality, even if you're coming up with a really fantastical concept.
Ultimately, any world that you're creating, it's only as good as the people that are making it.
We kept pushing to really bring all those details to life. The whole art department, we're the digital, and then set decorating team that managed to just sort of create the scope of London itself.
The thing that we took away from the Tolkien movies is that it works a lot better if you treat it with as much authenticity as you possibly can. There's a lot of aspects of London that I would be fine living in.
What an incredible feat, putting the city of London on wheels. Once you've been ingested, there's no going back. It's a new life for you, roaming the great hunting ground. At least that's how my character Tom would have seen it earlier in the movie. Everyone in London is part of a finely oiled system of tiers, a hierarchy. And it all started with author Philip Reeve's brilliant idea to stratify humanity aboard this mighty traction city.
Philip Reeve has created a whole society on board these moving cities. I've never seen a city the length of about 10 football fields with theatres and pubs and everything else kind of rumbling along the ground.
New London is built on a series of tiers. Down at the bottom, it's quite a big area. That's where all the refineries and the engine rooms and the smokestacks are, and all the big dismantling yards where they pull apart the towns they catch. That's where the poorest and hardest working people live. The tiers above that are low-grade housing. And then as you get further up London, the housing gets slightly better, and there is more areas of parkland. A bit more daylight gets in. And when you get up to the very, very top, that's where the high-ranking council officials and the really rich merchants and people live. And this was one of the ideas that came to me as soon as I thought attraction cities.
It tends to get gloomier in colours as you go down the tiers. Everything kind of meshes into these dark greens and dark blues and blacks and greys.
The bottom one is called the gut. It's where the jaws of London open and it absorbs other cities. It chases down and takes other cities in, and so it literally is ingesting them into a gut.
Stop her!
It's like going into the London sewers, you know, but a huge, wide space with a lot of smoke and a lot of flashing light. We built a set called the Netherborough Station, which is the lowest cupola station in the city.
The cupola basically was inspired by London's double-decker buses. It's connected to, effectively, a London Eye wheel.
As you go up tier by tier, the people get more and more wealthy. You've got museums, you've got shops.
Welcome to the beautiful streets of London. We are on the 3rd tier of the London Traction City.
The attention to detail is crazy on this, you know, down to the little quirk coins. You can go into the shops. It's an interesting futuristic world because it's so utterly familiar at the same time as being so very, very strange.
Follow me down the quirky little laneway. So our cheese shop sells algae cheese, of course. Delicious. And then our next shop is the Goggle Box Screen Repair Store, where you can upgrade your goggle box. And then we come round to Tottenham Court Station.
I mean, it completely boggles the mind. Sometimes baffles me, like, how we get all this stuff done.
And that's it.
And then at the very apex of the city, which is called top tier, that's where the wheelhouse is, where London's steered and controlled, and where St Paul's Cathedral is, which is very much a symbol of the resurrected London.
The first tier is the homes of the Lord Mayor, Valentine, and those sorts of people.
All the London tiers go up in levels of suspension and shock absorption. So the higher up you go in London, the less vibrations you get from the city.
The upper class of London, they've essentially got their own, almost like lily pads, that would all be individually on suspension systems.
London has a social strata, from the working class right through to the Lord Mayor.
There's lots of worlds within the world that start intersecting. It becomes very compelling for that reason.
It is a massive city, but it's got a really beautiful human scale to it.
Welcome to London.
Hierarchy is so connected to the world we live in today. So I think the world of London is actually very tangible.
Tonight, London is going to demonstrate its new power.
So, you have this massive city, but to believe in it, everything has to make sense and feel genuine down to the tiniest detail. It's 1700 years in the future. You can't buy any of this stuff at a store, so it all has to be made. In a single frame of film, there's so much information, colors and shapes that teach you about this city on the move. And like people, no two traction cities are alike. Costumes, props, set decoration. They all help turn this traction city into more of a character with a real personality.
Well, I read the books probably 2004 or 5. The visual concept of London is absolutely incredible. And I badly wanted to see the film. You've got to imagine a world where there's no factories making things.
Here we go. Bravo, man.
Philip's world did feel unique. The challenge of it was everything in this world has to be fabricated. I mean, we're not even based out of London, so we can't even shear off little sections of London to shoot in. Everything has to be handmade. We are trying to create something new, so it was a huge undertaking.
When we were making The Lord of the Rings, I remember everyone putting all their creative energies into something because the actual process of making the film was an adventure. And what's cool about that, from my perspective, is none of that has gone.
This art department here is just unbelievably good. From the smallest little details to the hugest sets, they create the most wonderful worlds.
We are doing all the panels for Cleo House, where Catherine lives. We've done a lot of drawing of trees. Mostly it's sponging, colour, textile, print paste. Doing a lot of screen printing as well.
London is comprised of bits and pieces, some of it from today's world, some of it from even junk from the future world. The detail is absolutely incredible.
You want your audience to love the layers that we all bring to it. The design, the props, the set decorating. So we make a lot of what we do.
Currently, I am fabricating goggle boxes. So they're like a viewing device, which will play some information on a screen.
That's our great fearless leader. He's made out of polystyrene. Basically, we're just trying to naturalise his feel and his texture, and also provide ourselves an option to create a little more detail here and there if we want.
These are the bobby hats. In total, we made probably 45, if not 50. They are all over London. They're in every tier, from the gut all the way up to tier 1.
In this world of London, that sense of creativity and imagination and it being about pouring all your energy into bringing it to life is still there. It feels so very much alive.
We have the best crews in the world. Everyone's trying to think of ways to problem solve and think of how to fully create worlds from nothing.
They like the uniqueness of bringing London to life. It's like, yeah, well, I haven't seen that. No one's seen that. Wow, we could make that. Let's do it.
My character in Mortal Engines, Tom Nэтsuorti, historian apprentice, 3rd class, works for the London Museum, where you'll find everything you could ever dream of knowing about the ancients. That's you guys. The museum showcases many amazing relics, and it's definitely the most fun set to explore. And yes, of course, I'm a little bit biased. The London Museum needed to be much more than just another location. They had to visualize a past that our story could be anchored in. There was a lot to draw on for inspiration, and the end result was a museum full of history and imagination. You show up on a Wednesday and you walk onto a new set, and it's, where did this come from? How quickly?
The museum set was beautiful. It's huge, it's gigantic.
Yeah, it was breathtaking. Immediately, it's just the scale of it has the feeling of a museum.
From the world of mortal engines, a lot of that history has been lost. No one knows the cause of it, no one knows why. So Dan Henner, our production designer, had to get his mind into the past, the present and the future.
How do you create the interior of the Natural History Museum in London inside a much smaller space? So it was about taking the essential design influences from there and then reducing them in a way that you don't lose the overall feel of the place.
We are currently at Stone Street A stage in the incredible museum set that Dan Henner and the incredible art team have put together. A really fast amount of time.
We've got 67 sets, but we don't have 67 stages.
Schedule is really tight. Something like 3 weeks to turn this studio around, bring this in, and dress it, of course.
I think it's always fun in stories when you have moments where the characters can offhandedly mention something about the world that's common knowledge to them, but the audience doesn't know. That gives the audience a great hook to then build the world out in their imagination.
Very few written records survived during that period. It may very well be they forgot how to read and write.
Through the arch where you see the tech, where you see the mobile phones that have been sort of frozen and petrified.
They can't understand why we relied on putting so much of our information into something that small and that vulnerable.
The things that exist in a cloud, that knowledge went bang like that in the 60-minute war. So what was dug up, they're able to put back together like pieces of a puzzle in the London Museum.
Most things were bought with the last 20 years of our technology in mind.
So there's the displays of various TVs and iPads and computer games and various things that they think is representative of our world today, which gives us a chance to have some ironic commentary on our world.
We had a lot of fun producing these items, some from brand new computers and phones, and others from stuff we found in junk shops.
We've got a few real ancient relics.
So this is one of the things we were lent by Peter Jackson. This is the Sopwith plane, the last one existing in the world.
Then we also have elements which are from their world, which have been found within the last 4,000 years.
And action! We come into the main hall. This is where you'll meet these two figures from a very popular piece of Hollywood history. And you see them sitting next to these amazing Greek statues.
It's fun, really. I mean, the minions are classic. I mean, it's all over the museum. It's an opportunity to take the piss out of the 21st century a little bit.
This cabinet is part of the book, which directly references the big hunting ground, which is what Europe has become.
We move into the library section, which is just an extraordinary piece. And yesterday, I pulled out the first book, and it was the collected poems of W.B. Yeats. And it was The Midsummer's Day. Of course, Yeats has this incredible, quite hyper-magical sensibility. You met my dad. He's got more hair than me, though.
The concept for this was to make it like a Fabergé egg, so you'd walk into this beautiful jewel of a room where the characters come in and reveal a secret doorway.
I don't want to go up there. I'm afraid to go.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a big moment. The line between historian and engineer is so clear that I couldn't do anything about it. And I've known Catherine since she's a child, because her father, Valentine, was part of my guild. So this is really quite an emotional moment.
This is the restoration room, which houses the fantastic wet specimens we source from Te Papa. This is a dolphin's head, shark's eyeballs, take everybody's interest.
That's great with the red hair and all that greeny blue stuff.
You already have to imagine so much when you're acting. So if you've got an art department that can create the world around you and you don't have to imagine that, it allows you to focus on everything else so much more.
It's actually all about the interaction between the various characters, and what we're producing is a world that they can exist in, and a world that's going to allow them to do the drama.
And action! 60 minutes is all it took for the ancients to blow up the world and bring humanity to the very brink of extinction. The 60-minute war, there was no record of what happened, and slowly over time, we start to put back together what actually happened.
We sort of played around with that a lot, kind of getting history wrong as a sort of a wink and a nudge to the audience. But Tom and his superior historians are sort of the last bastions of trying to hold on to human history, trying to remind people what happened and how we got here.
History is the past, the present, the future. Once you know how, then you can potentially go forward. And that's why the job of the historians is so important.
And finally, the moment you've been waiting for, St. Paul's Cathedral and Medusa. The idea here was to create something that blended the historical with the fantastical, a set that felt real since St. Paul's is real, but also a place that would be unique for audiences. This is also where Valentine's dreams for London burn the brightest, where Medusa is hidden. And who doesn't like visiting a movie villain's fortress?
Philip Reeve came up with this great notion that, that the most familiar building in this new attraction version of London, St. Paul's Cathedral, familiar to us today, is actually the home of this weapon that Valentine creates.
St. Paul's was exciting because it was the heart of the antagonist in the film.
This is a world where St. Paul's is sitting on the 7th tier of a big moving city of London. You're thinking, okay, well, we couldn't do that today, but certainly in the future, 2,000 or 3,000 years, they figured out a way to do it.
It reminds me of like old 60s kind of like futuristic movies.
Firing sequence terminated.
We spent a long time shooting stuff in there. It's like a puzzle-solving exercise.
So you've got this incredible history of people loving St. Paul's, and then you've got it being used for nefarious purposes. And that kind of has this friction. In the book, they talk about how difficult it was to keep St. Paul's together on a moving city because all the stones would crumble and fall apart. So it was finding that kind of balance between a reconstruction for the future and something that exists now.
The first challenge for recreating St. Paul's Cathedral is that we don't have a stage big enough to create it. We did a little bit of shrinking, but only a very little bit, like maybe 10%.
There's this whole thing about the old stuff, like something that goes back to almost medieval. St. Paul's has been around for hundreds of years, so there's a mixture of stone and metal.
We have all the stonework that has survived the 60-minute war, all these pieces that have been resurrected, and they've been held together by this metal that the builders of London have used to build their whole ship.
We had this look of this sort of blue iridescent steel that kind of stuck as an aesthetic which sort of trickled down through the rest of London.
You also had Medusa as this sort of infectious mechanical thing that's now a part of it.
It's where Valentine's using his power and he's being corrupted by his own power to destroy huge populations.
It's at the top of the city, so if you're going to fire a quantum energy weapon, it's good to do it from the very top. It's also a building in which he's able to build this weapon in secret.
The reference of Medusa is really coming back to nuclear weapons in a way. It's like, do you want weapons this powerful? Do you really want to destroy the world all over again?
In the book, it's described as like a cobra hood and also sort of orchid-like a flower, sort of the petals of the dome unfurling.
We had all these sort of wonderful lighting tricks that we could do.
There's all these different color stages that it goes through before it gets ready to fire. There's massive amounts of lighting cues. My lighting guy had blisters on his fingers just trying to program the lights in time for the scene.
The rest of the weapon is the cables and control structures and everything that goes all the way up to the dome of St. Paul's.
They've managed to get it to the point where it will fire out this electrical plasma-type beam.
It would be pretty much a completely CG effect to sell how big the destruction is.
Sci-fi sheds light on who we are and how we live and what we believe in a way no other genre can. You're projecting into the future or into an imagined world. As a result, you're somehow holding up the world in which we live.
The world of Mortal Engines is a nutcase world to some degree, wonderfully nutcase, but you actually buy it, you believe it.
There's something really cool about an imagined world. It's all about embracing the world. It's all about embracing the depth of the writing. We have our script, but we also have the novels to fill out the depth of the culture. And so it's not that different to Tolkien's world. It's still a world of fantasy. It's still a world you have to create and find.
The thing that ultimately hooks you into any story when something's starting to feel true is when you get a sense of the characters interacting in the most natural way possible with this world.
And you've lost the knob.
This incredible scope and vision that they brought to London is just mind-boggling.
We were completely at the reliance of the talents of everyone from our production designer to our concept illustrators to be as innovative as they could be. Creating a character like London was a huge undertaking and world-building process.
So as you've seen, it takes such a massive team to make a traction city like London come to life. I hope you've enjoyed exploring this incredible creation, and never forget, movement is life.